Hello, everyone. Happy to see you tonight at our seventh episode of second season of our Afterwork Talks podcast. And today we are talking about not very pleasant, but very useful topic. We will be talking about cybersecurity. And unfortunately, very actual. But still, if you listening to us and if you listen carefully to our conversation, and then if you visit Mark's session and workshop, you will be fully prepared, I think, for any risks and any incidents that can happen. But first, let me introduce myself. I am Oleksandr Moskalyuk. I have more than 20 years in IT, worked as a developer, as PM, and currently I'm working as a business analysis professional. And my co-host trainer wasn't able to join us tonight, so I will be alone today. And of course, our sponsors. Thank you to Deutsche Telekom, our main sponsor of our conference and our events. Also, we have IREP and IBO, and we have Masventa, the owners of European BA Day and the creators. And thanks to all of them for helping us to create this conference and these podcasts. But let me introduce my guest tonight. So, Mark, please say a few words about yourself. I think you will do it much better than me.
Sure. I'll keep it brief. A lot of people already know me, but so I'm a veteran of about 25 years in the IT transformation space. I started off as a telecommunications engineer, but for the last 15 years, I've been a technical business analyst working on a range of IT-centric projects, mostly relating to cloud transformation, data migration, and cybersecurity. I'm also quite commonly found on the speaking circuit, speaking at conferences around the world on the interface between business analysis and cybersecurity.
Thank you very much. Yeah, sorry, my microphone was off. So happy to have you tonight. And
It's
I
a
know
pleasure to
that,
be here, and thanks for inviting me.
yeah, my pleasure. And I know you recently came back from Australia, from another part of the world. And
Yes,
is it
that's correct.
and is cybersecurity the same there as here?
Well, so yes and no is probably the easy way of answering. So obviously, cybersecurity, the technology that we're implementing is the same everywhere. There are some regional differences. The main difference, the two main differences are maturity level of the countries and the different threat actors that are active in each area. Um, there's a particular, I'll go into it in a little bit more detail later, but there are specific threat actors that are more active in Europe and others that are more active in the Asia Pacific region.
Yeah. So tonight we will talk about your related experience from your recent trip. Also, let's talk about some cybersecurity case studies just to get to improve our awareness,
Mhm.
and of course some recommendations for business analysis professionals because it's our main audience. So let's start from your trip or
Yeah,
from incidents.
yeah. So just to give this a bit of context, so Australia, I don't want to give any kind of a false assessment that Australia is really bad with cybersecurity. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm what really brought cybersecurity onto into the public awareness, onto the political agenda, was a couple of years ago in Australia. They had a really bad year in terms of they had several really high profile data breaches. Um, Optus, one of their largest telecommunications providers, was breached. Off the top of my head, I think they had something like 40% of their citizens' personal information exposed during that breach. And if that wasn't bad enough, they also had a second breach of Medibank, which specifically included a lot of information from one of the large medical providers. Now, the problem with this is that a lot of organizations, when they think about breaches, they'll think about what can people use our information for. And so they'll let's say, for example, you're a bank. Well, it could be used to steal money from our customers. But if you're a school or a healthcare provider, you're probably not thinking about the financial consequences as much. But and you may think that actually, as a result, if people can't steal money from you're less likely to be a target. The alternative way of thinking about it is, what if these people aren't actually, what if you as the healthcare provider or you as the school are not actually the target? What if you're just a vehicle for getting access to the personal information? And so as you can see on the screen here, one of the main issues here is that the Medibank breach was not actually an attack on Medibank. They just provided the information that criminals were able to use to target all of their customers. And there was another incident a few years ago with a Canadian healthcare organization, which we're still, to my knowledge, seeing issues because so much information about the medical history of these people was exposed that there are cases of criminals phoning up. Can I just check? Are you able to hear my audio? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Everything's okay.
Yep. Yeah. So my headset is chattering. Yeah. So for this Canadian healthcare provider, they lost a lot of information in a breach, and so their customers would get phone calls saying things like, Mrs. Smith got a really important call. We're the receptionist at your local clinic. Your husband has just been admitted with heart failure. Now, Mrs. Smith knows her husband had a heart attack a couple of years before and would justly be absolutely mortified by this. The only problem is that while they're asking for credit card details because the insurance wasn't covering it, he's in the next room. So basically, this information can be used in all sorts of ways to socially engineer you, manipulate you, earn your trust, trying to use this as a catalyst for a wider criminal activity. And the Medicare breach in Australia was directly used in 11,000 cases. So it's a huge problem.
Yeah, I can confirm every of your words, because actually previously it was really complicated to fabricate some false identity or something like this. But now with AI and with data analysis and these data lakes, so you just gather all the information together and then create virtual identity or virtual assistant, then can just do millions of calls per minute or per hour. And it's just the problem of scale. Yeah. So, and this it's simplest attack and simplest threat, yeah, of all possible.
Yes. Yeah, this kind of a data leak, if this ends up in the hands of criminals, they can do incredible damage on a personal level, not just on an organizational level.
Yeah, and they also sell this information, so there is a market for such information. So they just it's not they don't lost it. They can't forget about this. Yeah, it's all saved, unfortunately.
Yeah, and they can sell it as many times as they want.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So
what can we do?
Yeah. So effectively, what Australia did in response to this is they thought about what would a strong response to this look like. They decided to document this in what they call the 2023 to 2030 cybersecurity strategy. and they've organized this around what they call 6 shields. So the 6 shields, strong business and citizens, which is basically making sure that everyone is aware of what these risks are, and making sure that you sort of are taking the appropriate measures to protect yourself. So this could be, for example, being aware of what a phishing attack looks like, having multi-factor authentication enabled on your sensitive accounts, things like that. Safe technology, well, that will be things like in every organization, you've got your malware detectors and data loss prevention tools to make sure that you have got the appropriate measures to make it as difficult as possible for somebody to actually attack you. So the next one is world-class threat sharing and blocking. So effectively, that comes down to threat intelligence. So understanding what bad actors there are out there, what their tactics are, what technologies they're using, and who they're targeting, so that you share this information, and that way organizations are better aware of what the nature of the threat against them might be and what they can do. Protecting critical infrastructure. So we're talking about all of those sort of like essential industries and capabilities that our nations rely on. So, for example, here you might be thinking about electricity providers, data centers, the economics actors in your country. So all of these organizations that fulfill essential roles in your economy, basically making sure that they are resilient, they're properly managed and controlled to make sure that they aren't going to be too vulnerable to any kind of attack. Sovereign capabilities is another really big one. Australia is really big on this. So the supply chain for cybersecurity is usually quite long. That typically, when you go out there and you buy an appliance that does fulfill some sort of security function, when you take into account all of the organizations and all of the countries that are providing electrical parts to it, software code, integration services, potentially you could be talking about collecting this from a dozen countries or more. And the problem is that if you've got so many different people involved, what happens if one of these, if the relationship with that country becomes fraught, or they're found to have political agendas that are contrary to your own. So it's really important that as much as possible you have the capabilities to design and build these things in your own country, and where you can't do that, you have relationships with preferred countries where you have very good relationships, where they can do as much of this as possible. And finally, sort of there is also all of the requirement to have good relationships and demonstrate leadership in cybersecurity within the region, because obviously if you can protect your neighbors, then that helps to keep your citizens safe as well. So those are the 6 shields that Australia are using to really beef up their own cybersecurity posture.
Yeah, I like their comprehensive approach. So they just covering, they understand the problem, and then just trying to build a system to
Yeah,
protect themselves. And
exactly. And
and
one of the other things that's really good about this is it's in a layered approach. So some of these shields add together to provide even higher levels of security for the citizens.
yeah, and at least they reduce the risks of attacks or of the scale of attack.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and and often when I talk about issues with supply chain, or about equipment supply chain, people says, it's just ridiculous, because all the computer just developed and manufactured in different parts of the world. Yeah, you have all the components, and it's impossible that somebody will just install something just to get to you there. But then just recall this recent attack, Israeli attack with pagers and
Yes,
phones. So
it's a perfect example. Think of it as risk reward. If the party has who is instigating this has got the sufficient resources, and if this is the what they feel the best way for them to achieve a very high level objective, um, unfortunately, they will likely find a way to make this work. And um, it's not about any one party in the world, to be quite honest, whether this is sort of like American, European, Russian, Chinese, or Israeli. Um, to a certain extent, all countries will use tactics like this to be able to advance their goals. You just can't rule out that in your case, somebody might not use those tactics against yourself.
yeah, and unfortunately, it's much cheaper than develop and produce real weapon. So
Exactly. Yeah.
that's another problem of cybersecurity and of scale.
Mm.
But
Yes, absolutely.
but anyway, yeah, it's a great approach and it's comprehensive approach. So I think they can really reduce the risks of any incidents. So let's talk about main frameworks or approaches to
Yeah.
cybersecurity.
Yeah. So just to sort of like set the tone first, I was just going to I just put together a very quick slide just to help to illustrate what what we're talking about when we talk about cybersecurity. Um it's it's kind of such a hot topic. Everyone sort of like thinks they know what it is, but in particular, since everything's gone all cloud and all online, it's become a much more sort of complicated, nuanced topic than it used to be. So it's not just about do you have documents that could have been stolen. Confidentiality is still just as important as ever used to be, but there were some new um, types of attack that needs to be protected against. So um, at a very high level, what we're looking at here is called the Parkerian HICSAD. Effectively, what this covers are 6 different qualities of security that every organization should aspire to be able to deliver in all of their solutions. So confidentiality is not just about has your information been stolen. It's a case of can you demonstrate whether anyone who is unauthorized to access some information has been able to look at it. If you can't tell whether anyone's looked at it or not, it doesn't really matter that nobody has because you don't know. So integrity is basically when you've created some information that you're running your business off. Is there a risk that it could be changed somehow without other than through the due process? So this could be a degraded data on a hard disk, for example. Sometimes it could be by accident, and sometimes it could be malicious. So availability is similar to integrity, but availability is basically denying your team access to your systems. So, for example, this could be a denial of service attack where you just attack somebody's network interface with lots and lots of traffic just to drown out the stuff that you want to hear, so your servers can't respond to it. Or it could be something more direct. You're actually physically damaging something so it can't function. Um, the 3 new ones, though, accuracy. This is when somebody tries to forge information. So it could either be that they're pretending the information came from a reliable source when it comes from an unreliable source. That's very big with attacks on AI tools these days, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to poison the language model, filling it with lots of junk so that the AI is making the wrong kinds of inferences from that. Or another way of looking at this is, let's say, for example, you're a legal practitioner and you're exchanging contracts. what if you've got a receipt from a third party saying they've accepted a contract, and then they later say they never received the email in the first place? You need to have some sort of something that you can authenticate in the form of a certificate that can actually prove that A, they received it, and B, the response came from them for the contract to be valid. So just to wrap up the final two, so control it. So let's say, for example, you've got a laptop which has got sensitive information on, but somebody steals it from your car. So while that's encrypted, potentially the confidentiality is still available, but it's outside of your control. You cannot change it. You cannot roll out new software to it, new security. So potentially, if the people who now have it in their possession are able to find a way to exploit the data on there, let's say, for example, they steal the hard disk out there, and in a few years' time, there's a quantum computer that can crack the encryption. That's no longer in your control, and as a result, it still has a higher degree of vulnerability. And the final one, utility. So utility is whether the system that we're talking about here is fit for being used for the intended purpose. Now, this can mean many things. So in let's say, for example, you're dealing with a financial service, and there's this service does not have validation controls in it to be able to identify what currency is being entered here. That's not going to be fit for purpose because you don't actually understand the full meaning of the data that's being exchanged. So utility is basically about whether this service is fulfilling the function that it's intended for. And in cases where you don't have the appropriate checks and within the application, it could be that somebody is able to manipulate this system. So let's say, for example, they're able to make a deposit in one currency, or this is not a very likely example, but hypothetically, this system, if supposing you're able to make a deposit in one currency which has got a certain exchange rate, and it is the number is converted into another currency which has got a different exchange rate, potentially that would be a exploit that somebody could find useful. If you translate that into other scenarios which are more likely, this could translate to somebody being able to elevate their privilege on a system which enables them to do things that you wouldn't actually want them to do because they aren't an authorized user. So that is kind of the sort of attack that we need to be aware of and vigilant to as business analysts when we decide how the security of particular tasks and activities within a system are designed to make sure that they are going to work as intended.
Yeah, and to support your this approach, we should say that when we talk, for example, the control example, and it's stolen and waiting for a quantum computer just to crack your codes. Actually, unfortunately, we live in IT world where everything moves very fast. And there was an example when people just one guy encrypted his with cryptocurrency wallet and forget the password. And because there was a flaw in the in the encryption algorithm, so guys were able just to crack the encryption and get the password.
Yeah,
And it was just in a few years.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that case. It wasn't actually the encryption algorithm; it was the hardware of the wallet. But yeah, yes, absolutely.
I think it was encryption, but anyway, yeah, I think there was a lot of examples.
we may be talking about two different examples. These things happen more often than you might think.
But unfortunately, it's not. It's not a future. It's everyday risks, and we should think about this carefully now.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing to think about is that this isn't something that is a single point in time. Going back to the quantum computer thing, a lot of people are still thinking, well, do we have a quantum computer? Well, kind of, we do have. They're just not practical for the types of security challenges they're up against at the moment. They need to be even more powerful than they are today. But what people aren't thinking about is if somebody steals your data now, which is encrypted using modern authentication, so modern encryption, um, and then holds on to it for 5 years, 7 years. Let's say, for example, we're talking about that cryptocurrency or your health records or something like that. That information is still likely to have value in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. And if the quantum computer comes at that point and you've lost control of that data because it's encrypted using data encryption standards that are available today, you can't improve that to quantum safe encryption later. And so as a result, we do need to think now about the risks to our data that will arise potentially several years in the future. And that is a serious concern because we still haven't finally settled on what quantum safe encryption looks like. There are a few really promising algorithms, but just in the last year or so, one very promising algorithm was basically found to be broken fundamentally. I think it was last year's DEF CON or possibly Black Hat that somebody announced this, and immediately that was out of the window. If organizations had adopted that wide scale, that would have been worse than if they hadn't have migrated at all. So it's not a quick process.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. So let's move to the next part of our conversation.
Sure. Yes. So I just wanted to just quickly sort of give a bit of a taste when we talk about who we're up against here. It's a dangerous assumption to think that we're up against lone wolf hackers. There are many different types of people that might be interested in our organization and our data, and I like to illustrate them on this 2x2 axis. I mean, what analyst doesn't like a 2x2 axis? So what we've got here is we've got on one side what the motivations for these people are. So sometimes they're motivated by financial reward, which makes them quite predictable, and it's quite clear who they'd be going up against. They're looking for either well-funded organizations or organizations that have got a lot of customers who collectively are worth a lot. But in terms of ideology, that can get really, really unpredictable. It could be something as simple as you finding that an organization is associated with somebody with quite shady political values of their own right. Just that connection gets them a bad profile in the news and gets a whole load of people with cyber skills motivated to act against them or their organization. And obviously, the purest form of this is the kind of political activism that you see from state actors, where they're vying for control over sort of the economic pie worldwide. So this can look very different from one nation-state relationship to another. Sometimes it's economic competition where they're stealing each other's intellectual property or just trying to generally hassle and degrade the economies. In other cases, it could be sort of a covert cyber war scenario where they're trying to get military intelligence or disrupt military operations in the field, expose the identities of informants, things like that. So you end up with this really sort of complicated playing field, really, where you have to look at all of these different parties, who's out there, who are likely to be interested in you based on the best intelligence you have, and in terms of the resources they've got. So some criminal gangs are very, very well resourced. If they can sort of pull together, let's say, for example, a dozen specialists, each with their own skill set, they can launch quite sophisticated attacks that will be hard for almost any organization to defend against.
Yeah, and I want to, I have two comments here. First of all, sometimes it's much easier to fight against of criminal organizations or people motivated by money. Because
Yeah,
first of all, we're talking about their target will be people with money as well. So they
yeah,
have some resources to protect themselves.
yeah. That's absolutely true. So there's 2 points about that. So the first one is, are you familiar with the joke about if you're with a group of people and you're trying to escape from a bear, you don't need to be able to run faster than the bear. You need to just be able to run faster than the
To
slowest person
outrun the, yes, the slowest one.
yeah, yeah. So it's similar with money here. So at the end of the day, if money is the motivating factor of the attacker, what you need to do is you basically need to make yourself the most expensive target that they can go for. If they need to throw more development time, they need to go out there and buy more data on you, or more zero-day vulnerabilities off the dark web. All of that costs them money. And if you're making yourself an expensive target to go after, they're more likely to look at the low-hanging fruit represented by your competitors. So that's a big part of this. In the UK, I think it was last year, we had a case where the British Library was unfortunately ransomwared. What a lot of people don't realize is that the National Library in the States was attacked the same day, presumably, but I don't know 100%, but I think it's widely believed that was the same actor. The difference is that unfortunately, they found that the British Library was actually more susceptible than the other, and so that became their primary target. So if you, it's not just a case of making yourself bulletproof. That is probably unrealistic. But if you can make yourself the hardest target you possibly can, then it's less likely that you'll be the target that these bad actors will settle on compromising.
Yeah, and I like another example when I think last year or a few years ago in US they made the legislation that you can't pay ransomware legally. So and
Yes.
in this way they just reduced the number of attacks because attackers understood that previously they just got the target has an insurance or had an insurance, so everybody got their money and everyone is happy, but now they just can't pay, so
Yeah, exactly. Um, that yeah. So that's a really hot topic in the cybersecurity community. There are a lot of people in the cybersecurity community that says that we need to take a scorched earth approach and make it completely illegal tomorrow to pay any ransoms. Um, I think that it's that that's definitely sort of like the end state that we need to get to. But I think what we will probably need to do in the meantime is, firstly, as of tomorrow, we should make it necessary that every organization that pays a ransom has to disclose it. That way we get the threat intelligence on who is actually active in the area, who's likely to be attacking. That way you can protect not only the customers of your organization, but also the other institutions in your orbit. But also you need to be able to set a reasonable period in which these organizations can get ready, because if you make it so that they're unable to pay ransoms as of tomorrow, let's say, that throws all sorts of issues in terms of the liability for cyber insurance, in terms of managing potentially huge amounts of technical debt that might need to be put in place in order to prevent these cyber attacks. And it gets to the point that actually an organization saying, well, if we can't protect ourselves, why or how can we sort of actually start fixing this? If you give somebody, let's say, an 18-month or 2-year window to get their act into order, that would be a lot more motivating, I feel, and would be more likely to put the pressure on people to actually make the choices within the next couple of financial cycles and get things done. Otherwise, you'll just end up with widespread non-compliance.
Yeah, and again, when we're talking about financial motivation, it's just it's just market, so it somehow balances itself. But when we talk about ideology and the national state actors, so unfortunately, the war in Ukraine just changed a lot, because previously cyber attacks, it was even on national level, it was something unique. So we heard about the attack of Israeli attack on nuclear facility in Iran, or something like this. But it was once it was unique situations. Currently, in our war, Russia uses, and we as well uses, a lot of cyber instruments. It's now, unfortunately, it's part of the war. It's just another tool. And what I'm afraid of, that all these tools are spread among a lot of people, and it's much easier to install some cybersecurity software, or just special software, than install, for example, machine gun. And
Yes.
actually, unfortunately, all this software will be practically tested. And they tested not only on just how to get money or just bank account. They tested how to destroy electric grid, how to destroy. We had a situation when they were able to stop heating for more than I think 100,000 people for few days.
Yeah.
So yeah,
By the way,
it's
this is
exception, but
probably,
still it's
this is probably a good time to flick to the next slide, because
Mhm.
there's some illustrations on the next slide. Yeah. So this is an illustration of this is actually from Microsoft's Threat Intelligence, and they're giving an illustration of all the different threat actors that they're monitoring. So, for example, if you look at the yellow ones in the top right-hand corner, they represent Russia. If you look at the orange ones in the bottom left, that represents China. You might see a couple of actors there that you may not have thought of. But yes, that you will see a lot of threat actors on this slide here that are using cyber security or cyber attacks for military purposes or intelligence gathering purposes, and a wide range of activities like that.
And and again, unfortunately, it's really hard to complicated to control. Yeah, again, when you have some weapon, for example, you can analyze it and understand what the source, who produced it.
Yes.
But with software, it's much harder, much more complicated. And okay.
Yeah, it is. I think all I can really say about that is So you're never going to be 100% secure, but it's about being as prepared as you possibly can for the circumstances. Are you able to manage a response, and do you have infrastructure that is resilient against the most common types of attack? A lot of organizations may feel that they're secure, but there's this idea of a hard shell and a runny center. You might so effectively, if you are relying on your external perimeter defenses to keep your organization safe, the moment somebody finds a single pinprick through that wall inside, potentially everything else within it could be vulnerable. That could be somebody clicking on a phishing email. It could be somebody bringing a USB stick in. It could be you hiring the wrong person. There could be any number of reasons.
Yes.
And so it's so important these days to think, with every project you do, how can you make sure that this solution that you're building is going to be as resilient as possible in the event that somebody who is not your intended user uses it in a way other than it was originally intended.
Yeah, I love this expression that we should switch from walls to risk management, because
Yes.
currently castle walls doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. It's um, certainly it was reasonably effective when all of your data was on your own premises, all of your employees were on your premises, everyone else was outside. But that was before we ended up adopting the cloud so widely. So now all of a sudden, all of your applications and services and data, that's everywhere. And it's not even necessarily on tenants that you control. It sometimes your a lot of your data is resting with third parties that you've given permission to process it. And secondly, since the pandemic, obviously so many people are working from home, working remotely. You just do not know where people are. So how do you actually work out whether this person is trying to connect to your cloud provider from a hotel room in Hong Kong? Is that one of your managers who's traveling? Or is that somebody who is trying to attack you and cover cover their steps? It's very difficult to tell, and so as a result, you need to take a risk managed approach. Look at what they're doing. Is what they're doing in line with their normal behavior patterns? In which case, maybe it's okay. Maybe it's not a particularly risky request. But if it's something that is either highly risky or completely unexpected behavior, then absolutely you need to have the controls in place to be able to prevent people from doing this.
Yeah, and adding to this, we have so complicated software now that nobody can be sure that you don't have any problems inside the libraries you use. Yeah,
Yes, yeah,
and
and you're exactly right. There have been some recent instances where whole GitHub libraries were inundated with dangerous requests, simply because the attackers were trying to get people to import these libraries and into their data sets, and then start building on that, so that basically the malware would be getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the supply chain of the software. So at some point, because it's so embedded, it starts to look legitimate. So you absolutely need to be very aware of which code is being introduced into the software that you're developing. And a common way of dealing with that is something called a software bill of materials. Um, I'm not saying that needs to be done every single time, but I think the more important that the um, the code that you're working on is, the more likely that you're going to need to think about a full sort of supply chain approach to work out exactly who's been involved or who has contributed towards this code base.
Yeah, and it becomes more and more complicated, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Shall we
so
move on to the next slide? Yeah. Yeah.
mhm,
So basically, this is where we switch from what the problem is to what we can do about it. And I think one of the key things that I'm very sort of big on is that I think that all change professionals needs to be aware of how cybersecurity works these days. We don't need to be experts in cybersecurity. I think it's the work that we do is our expertise, but we need to be aware to a higher level than the general workforce of how cybersecurity works. So fundamentally, in different parts of the world, there are different cybersecurity frameworks we adopt. So in America, the most popular one is the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, I think it is. They've provided this thing called the Cybersecurity Framework 2.0, which is divided up into these 6 domains. So from a business analysis perspective, effectively, it would be a question of when you're having conversations with your stakeholders in an early stage, just having a think about which of these we're likely to be disrupting. Are we going to be introducing new tools, new devices? In which case, what kinds of monitoring capabilities do we need to have in place for this? What vulnerabilities are there on there? So if it's going to have software, what patching um, procedures do you need to have in place, for example? Or if there needs to be an incident management response to plan for that. Do the information security team have the information about this tool that they require to document that? So effectively, we all need to have an awareness of the framework that is in use in your organization, so that you can have those conversations at an early enough stage, so that you can actually make sure that all of that information is available at the right time. It's just not acceptable in modern times for you to wait until the last minute and just sort of pull together a bundle of documents in the last minute. A lot of these questions need to be answered early enough that you can make sure that you can embed this into the solution. Otherwise, you're creating a lot of work or leaving a lot of risk. And the one on the right, that is the UK's equivalent. That's the cyber assessment framework from the National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK. There are others depending on whichever jurisdiction you're in, but these are just a couple of examples.
yeah, and from my own experience, business analysts can be cybersecurity champions in some way. So we can
Absolutely.
start
Well,
promoting cybersecurity awareness, cybersecurity approach, and frameworks, and help other parts to implement all these things.
100%. So I always talk about this as like a Venn diagram where you've got this overlap between the delivery team and you've got the cybersecurity team. The delivery team, their sole purpose for being there is to bring innovation into the organization, change that delivers a positive disruptive effect, making the organization more effective, more efficient. That's what we're there to do. The cybersecurity teams are there to manage risk. They're there to be vigilant and identify anything that's happening anywhere in the organization that will represent an unacceptable risk. Now, the problem is this can create a tension where we're trying to push change out there, but we aren't aware that the change that we are trying to implement brings risk with it. Maybe it's moving information from a secure part of the organization to an insecure part of the organization. And if we don't have the right controls, that is potentially going to create a level of risk that is more costly to the organization than the benefits it's delivering. The business analyst, because we're involved so early in the process, and because we own so many of the relationships with a wide range of stakeholders, we're in a perfect position to be able to advocate for a pragmatic, collaborative approach where we have these conversations early on and we develop the best possible solution, the most resilient solution for the organization. And in doing so, you can reduce the amount of residual security debt and reduce the amount of rework and risk that the project is taking on. So it leads to a much more cost-effective way at implementing cyber controls.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
cyber
So
resilience.
yeah. So I think this is a really hot topic at the moment that we're very used to talking about cybersecurity. What we don't talk about as often, but it's coming more and more onto the agenda with things like the EU's DORA Act and the UK's Cyber Security and Resilience Bill that is currently going through the British legislative process. A lot of organizations are now thinking more about resilience. So I've given a definition here that comes from the National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK. The term cyber resilience refers to an organization's ability to maintain the current operations of its essential functions, even in the presence of adverse cyber events. So what we're talking about here is, let's say, for example, you may feel that the system you've developed is working exactly as intended, but what if somebody is able to start throwing stones in, pulling wires, and tinkering with it in ways that wasn't expected? That's when you really start to find out how fragile it potentially is. And it may well be that it works exactly as intended, but what if there are ways that people can deny access to the data? What if there are ways that people can use it without appropriate privileges to either gain access to information or manipulate the way it works? You potentially are exposing yourself to huge economic damage, reputational damage, all sorts of issues. So it's really important that we don't just think about how something works and whether it works in the way it's intended. We need to think about, is this going to actually operate under duress? And in a lot of industries and a lot of jurisdictions, the governments are now putting regulations in place that actually demand that we do this properly.
Yeah, totally agree. And in this case, I remember the situation when there was an incident when in Bangladesh they just cut single internet connection cable and stop all the internet in the country, in one day.
Yeah,
So yeah, that anything can happen, and yes, people we now should think about how our systems will work with all the possible interruptions.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. So this is just an illustration of the pillars within DORA, which is the EU's rule. The EU has just brought out some legislation for the financial institutions called the Digital Operations Resilience Act, which is built around these 5 pillars. And this is just an illustration of the types of rules that we're seeing being brought in right now to impose requirements on organizations to deliver a more resilient solutions to their customers.
yes, and in this case, I agree that we need to report all the incidents. So we need to understand what happened just to prevent the same incident from happening again, and also to start mitigating the results, because often aftermath is much worse than even current damage to the system.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the biggest concerns is that when you've been compromised for the first time, it's very difficult, particularly if the attacker has been able to move laterally within your organization. It's extremely difficult for you to be 100% sure that you've been able to lock them out. There was a case, I think it was last year, where there was a attacker had found a way to exploit vulnerabilities in, I think it was Barracuda email gateways, and the attack was so serious that the manufacturer's recommendation is throw them away and start again from scratch. The problem is that a lot of their customers actually did that, and they put in brand new email gateways. And I'm kind of wondering whether anyone knows where this story is going. But basically, a few weeks later, they discovered that actually the new ones were now being compromised because the attackers had anticipated that this was going to be what was the advice that was given. And so they actually had systems that were on the enterprise networks on the inside that were designed expressly to reinfect new email gateways that were installed afterwards. So basically, the if the first thing to keep in mind is one, keep your perimeter as tight as possible with monitoring so you can identify an attack as soon as possible and contain it. And secondly, if you do have an incident, you need to make absolutely certain that you've got the monitoring in place to be able to actually detect if anything else were to happen later on that is unexpected, because these things, once you've been attacked once, you're more likely to get attacked again and again. So the first time counts beyond words.
Yeah. So
anyway,
excuse me.
No, go ahead.
So we discussed a lot about cybersecurity, but anyway, first of all, we will have a workshop. Mark will have a workshop during our next conference, and I think now you see that you can get a lot of useful information and study a lot during this workshop. So please sign up, check our webpage, and sign up for the workshop. And
absolutely.
Session, AI is a unfortunately game changer, in cybersecurity. So understanding how AI works and how to work with AI is critical in cybersecurity as well. So your session, I really want to hear it during the conference.
Yeah. I've been developing this particular workshop for a while. AI is such an exciting technology. It enables organizations to achieve so much more with the resources they've got. But unfortunately, in all things, when you develop a technology for good, it's only a matter of time until it ends up in some of the wrong hands. So basically, Bad Robots, this is my talk where I describe some of these this misuses of AI and basically what it can be used for and how we can prepare for this so we can take appropriate countermeasures.
So so check our webpage, just sign up for the conference and for the workshop, and we have a few minutes for questions. Christiane, hi.
Hey, Alexander.
Happy to see you. Do you have any questions?
No, not yet, but I was happy with the clarity of what Mark explained, because I'm not used to, excuse me, I'm not used to thinking of security, and this is going to help.
Yeah. And Very happy to answer any questions you have after the call. I think you've already got my details, so you're more than welcome to drop me an email if you like.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. See you at the conference and on our next podcasts. So have a nice day. And Mark, thank you very much for
My
this
pleasure.
conversation.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Bye and have a nice evening or day or whenever you will watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.